few weeks, we went from very high, inspiring highs like Pesach, like Purim, Pesach, and then we get to very devastating lows, like Yom HaShoah, Yom HaZikaron, and then back to Yom HaTzmaut, Lag BaOmer, which has a kind of a mixed thing, and then to Shavuot, Yom Yerushalayim before that. Some would describe that as a kind of roller coaster, but I don't look at it that way. I look at it as the complexity of Jewish life and Jewish history, the complexity that has really inspiring and breathtaking highs like Ma'amad Har Sinai, Yetziat Mitzrayim, and the Kibbutz Galuyot and the foundation of the state, and devastating and tragic lows like the pogroms that we suffered and the Holocaust and the attacks by our Arab nation enemies around us throughout most of Israel's history. And it's a mixture of these highs and lows that really characterizes life and characterizes Jewish history. And that's what I'd like to talk about tonight is the foundation of the state, and starting from biblical times, why we have a state, how did it come about, and really talking about the miracles that we've seen in the last 100 or so years. So then I hope to do all that and finish by 11 o'clock or so, 11:15, depending on how much time you have, and if anyone joins, they're more than welcome. So the first question we'd like to deal with is why are there borders? Why have any borders at all? Why not just say, well, like the Muslims say, Islam will conquer everything. There's the Dar al-Islam, and that has to constantly increase till Islam covers the whole world. Or Christianity tries to missionize and get everyone to. We Jews, we don't do that. In fact, even in the Torah, there are borders to the state, to the country. That these borders are ours, and we can expand them and that, but that's not the goal. This is Hashem doesn't give us all the land. In fact, it very clearly says that there's lands that don't belong to us, and we can't attack them. So we're given borders, and we're given a country, very clear country, and part of that is because what is Hashem's purpose in having a Jewish country, a country that's run by the Torah? And this is taken from Rabbi Sassoon's article, Why Does the Torah Need Eretz Israel? I don't know if you read it. Are you familiar with it, Moe? The Rabbi Sassoon, maybe about 40 years ago, Rabbi Salman David Sassoon wrote an article that I think is a seminal position on why have a state? Why have borders? Why limit us? Why limit the Torah? And it has to do with the fact that and why particularly where the location that we're in on the southeastern shore of the Mediterranean Ocean. Why over there? And Rabbi Sassoon answers this article brilliantly, answers the question brilliantly in his article, saying that Hashem wants to change the world and improve the world. But he had a hope that the world would be good just for the fact that he gave us everything, like in Gan Eden. Or then in Noach, he had a hope that he would choose a family from a tzaddik, and that family would be a good family. And that didn't work out either from Torah Palaga. So Hashem finally realizes that only with a nation, with a family, can he start with a family that is brought up, and with a nation can he hope to improve the world. And that's what he says, why he chooses Abraham. כי דתיו למען אשר יצווה את פניו בתור אחריו לשמור דרך אדוני לעשות צדקה ומשפט. Because Hashem chooses Abraham because he knows that he'll teach his family to follow the way of God and to do tzedakah u'mishpat. And that becomes really the focal point, the reason why Hashem chooses Am Yisrael, chooses the family of Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, and chooses the idea of having a border. And only with Abraham only starting with Abraham, starting with the Brit and Betarim, or starting with when he leaves Canaan, when he leaves Ur Kasdim, we have him say Hashem telling him that he's going to give that land to him, that land that he comes to. So it's Rabbi Sassoon says that Hashem wanted to improve the world by making a family that would be brought up in Torah, brought up in what the Torah requires, in the Kar Mishpat, Chesed, the Kar Mishpat. These are the values, and to make a nation that will be a model nation for the world. And he puts his nation in what at that time was a land bridge between the two great empires, Babel and or Ashur and Mitzrayim. But you have the Fertile Crescent on the one hand, and the Nile Valley and the Nile Delta on the other, were two of the, at least in the Levant, two of the major areas of civilization. And Israel, the land, the strip of land of the coast on the southeastern shore of the Mediterranean, was a land bridge that really everyone had to go through, because if you go more to the east, it's full of desert, and if you had any contact between the two great empires, they would go and pass through our land and learn from our ways. That was the hope of Hashem, and the reason why this particular location is important. You might say, well, why is it so important now? So the whole world is a global village, and it's when we think about it now, it is a kind of well, number one, historically, when the Uganda plan was proposed, there were very few people that thought it was a good idea, and those who didn't think it was a good final idea, only as a good starting point in the middle. So they didn't say, oh, that's, let's go to Uganda, that'll be it. But they thought it was a good stepping stone to building a nation. And there were other attempts at building a Jewish nation in other places, but it never took hold. And it's because historically we're connected to this land. This is the land of our prayers and our dreams and our aspirations. But it's not just about coming back to our country and the nostalgia of it, but it's about having a land and having a state and having our own borders where we're in control, what that means. And that is a critical point. Rav Kook writes that it's not just a mere nationalism that motivates us, and that motivated Moshe Rabbeinu that wanted to go into Eretz Israel when he prayed in Vayet Hanan. And it was the fact that we get the chance to build a Torah society free of any other influences, free of having to look over our shoulders. Jean-Jacques Rousseau wrote a book called Emile. It's a very long book, and I don't agree with a lot of what's there. I don't know if you're familiar with it. But in this book, Emile comes into contact with a monk, and the monk says the following words, but which is so true. The monk is speaking about different people, and for the Jewish people, well, I don't really know what they believe, because I don't know what they would say when they don't have to keep looking over their shoulders. So we only will know what the Jewish people, this is more or less what he's saying, when they're not a minority in a sea of a foreign country, in an island in the sea of a foreign country, but when we have our own ability to see, decide our destiny, to build a country the way the Torah wants. And that's why it's so critical that we have borders and we have a state, and in this particular location. Going back to why this location, it is a point between the West and the East and the Arabs, for example. In fact, sometimes I think
culturally, you mean West and East?
Culturally, West and East. Yeah, it's not. I mean, Turkey. You might say Turkey also has that kind of duality, but it is one of the cultures between the the three land masses of Europe, Asia, and Africa. And we're smack in the middle of these three geographically as well. It's also a kind of bridge for cultures and taking the ingathering of the kibbutz galuyot that we saw is really a mixture, as you know, a mixture of cultures and languages. Where do you live in Israel, Laurie?
Modi'in.
In Modi'in. So, and any one day you can walk down the street and see Russians, Ethiopians, French people. There's some Anglo-Saxons in Modi'in also, I'm sure.
Mm-hmm.
And it's
South American, Australian.
So it became the focal point of all the galuyot, and of course, we're not saying that we have built a Torah society yet, but I think that some of the key elements of the Torah have been so ingrained within us. For example, the value, the incomparable value of Jewish life, of life in general. And we see that in the way that the IDF carries out the wars and the battles that we have to do. It's always an attempt to minimize the loss of citizen life, even though we're not part of the Arabs are not part of the Geneva Convention. Our enemies do not follow those rules, and we still follow them. So the location is important even today for these reasons. Really, we're living in the midst of a miracle. We're living in the midst of something that was dreamed about over years and attempted over many, many years, and unsuccessfully, until Herzl, who was obsessed with the idea, decided to give his life and give everything he had for this. This is. Have you ever been in Basel, where the first Zionist Congress took place?
You were there?
I was there. Yeah, my wife took me to Switzerland. I said, if we go to Switzerland, we're going to Basel. Yeah. So I went to the Herzl Museum, actually. It's as big as my living room.
I don't know if it's big or small, but how big can a living room be?
Not too big. It's Tel Aviv,
Mm-hmm.
So we asked the person at the museum who opened it up on Tuesday from 3 to 5. Why did Herzl have this in Basel? And she said, you know why? He didn't have it in the big cities of Europe. He didn't have it in Vienna. He didn't have it in Switzerland. He didn't have it in Zurich, or he didn't have it in Geneva, not in London, and not in Paris. And the reason why he had it in Basel was just a small backwater, like having it in Asbury Park, Is that no one wanted it. They thought he was crazy. They thought Herzl was crazy, and maybe he was, because it was such an unusual idea, and people have thought about it before, but no one said let's actually do this. And Herzl was obsessed with this idea, and it's really to his credit. Yet you have to mention the credit that he years before that he thought the solution to the Jewish problem is
to assimilate, mass assimilation,
mass conversion to Christianity.
Right, conversion, yeah.
In a letter that he wrote to one of his friends, he said, "I think that's the only way," and this is desperation that he realized, and then he makes a turnaround and he writes Alt Neuland and the Jewish state and these tremendous visionary, Alt Neuland being a novel. And when you read
I
Oh,
have it over here
uh,
on my bookshelf.
what's it in, you have it in Hebrew or English?
This is actually an interesting edition that has it in like 7 different languages. But are you about to say that the Hebrew version of the book was called Tel Aviv?
Tel
Is that where
Aviv.
you're going with this?
And wait, I see Arabic over there. Is that Arabic?
Yeah, they have it. This edition has it in Arabic, Amharic, Russian.
Hold on. What do you read Arabic?
No, I don't know.
Put it,
My parents got this as like a gift or something. I read it in the Hebrew, but
just hold it up a second.
But in the Hebrew, it doesn't say
so
Tel Aviv. It says Alt Neuland, right?
in the Arabic, it says Alt Neuland also. And yeah, sorry. It's just a transliteration. It doesn't,
Exactly.
the Arabic is just a transliteration. So, so, so it's a tremendous visionary thing, and then it's worthwhile to read his vision. Herzl actually was completely obsessed with this, and he gave everything he had for this, everything. He died very young, actually, and his wife didn't really believe in this whole procedure. And when he died, I don't know if you know this story, that when he died, the Sachnut or whatever was the Zionist movement said we can't leave his widow penniless, and they offered her to a choice of bonds that they were going to buy for her, and the choice was to have the bonds of the Jewish state, the nascent Jewish state, but to have the bonds of the Austro-Hungarian Empire.
She chose the latter, but she probably,
she chose the latter in what
they,
1907.
They disappeared. Yeah.
And World War I came, and there was no more. They were not worth the paper they were written on. So you have the miracle of Herzl, the miracle of how the Balfour Declaration happened, the miracle of World War I and Weizmann's contribution that laid some of the groundwork for what was going to be the Balfour Declaration. Balfour himself was a kind of eccentric person, and he was a prime minister, and he was a minister of different things. But then he actually came with the declaration when he was no longer prime minister. But he's a very eccentric person, and how these things happen is nothing short of miraculous. And when we think about it, it's they were trying. The Zionists were trying everything. Herzl went to the Sultan. Herzl would try anything to have this happen, and nevertheless, it succeeded. And this is, and not to mention, Jabotinsky and Begin and the people that really fought to have this country. I think the Etzel Lechi and the Haganah, of course, and the Palmach, under very, very difficult conditions to scratch out and to take this land back. It's an unbelievable miracle. And that's the reason I made Aliyah. I remember exactly when I was 19 years old and 20 years old, between 19 and 20 in BMT, and the hills overlooking Givat Mordechai on top of Bayit Vagan. I looked, to my right and saw Summit Pat and all the building, Givat Mordechai, Bet HaKerem, and Shaarei Tzedek, and I said to myself, what would the Ramban or the Ramban or Rabbi Yehuda Levi would have given to see what I see now? How can we not be part of this miracle? I don't want to be in the bleachers. I don't want to be in the bleachers. I want to be on the playing field. I mean, you who made Aliyah, you probably had similar types of feelings and thoughts.
I definitely can identify with that sentiment. Although I think, to be honest, at the core of it, what really awakened this drive for me to make Aliyah is more better represented by Yom HaZikaron. You're talking about an experience you had when you were young. So when I was around that age, it was the middle of the second Intifada. much you lived here in Israel and experienced, I'm sure, very intensely. But I had the privilege to visit Israel a few times during that period, including one time during my bar mitzvah. And as a visitor, and I'd been there before the Intifada, like 1999, with my brother's bar mitzvah, my older brother. We came, the whole family, and weren't afraid. And we came back 2 years later, very different experience. But you come and people appreciate that you're there, and you feel like the country needs us. There's no stronger way to support a country that needs help at a time like this than to come and say, I'm here also. I stand with Israel. And I've spoken to other people who've shared similar sentiments. Like right. It was at times of war, at times of distress, when they realized in themselves that they can't not be in Israel.
Right.
At a time like that.
Tremendous. And it's we are living in a unique opportunity in Jewish history, and that's the next part of my class of the lecture is really the prophecies. This is we'll go through them pretty quickly, but there's what's amazing about it is that we're living what was prophesied and almost impossible to think about. And sometimes you read some of the Nebuot, and it's chilling how it's really, for me, the one that stands out very, very strongly. Two of them stand out very strongly, is the Herzl, of chapter 37, where if you have a Tanakh, you can look at it, but I can also I could put it online if you want. I can share a screen if you want.
Probably a good idea for people watching it later.
Let me share the screen. Okay, so you have tremendous Nebu'ah. Yechezkel lives right after the Churban Bayit Rishon, or after the Galut Yehoiachin. He is surrounded by people that said that have given up hope completely, and he's brought into the valley of the dry bones, and this is he sees the bones around. The many that spread over the valley, and they were very dry. And Hashem said to him, can these bones live? And Hashem tells him, and he answers, only you know. And it says, prophecy over these bones and say to them, well, dry bones, hear the word of Hashem. And say to them, I will breathe, I will cause breath to enter you, and you shall live again. And he goes on, and as he was speaking, this is what happened. The bones started coming together, and they actually come back to life. And this is when we think about what happened in the World War II, and how we were, and just the images of the human skeletons that are still alive, and they were liberated from the camps, and they're also the horrific images of the piles of bodies and mass graves, and to think that the Jewish people was finished then, almost, and here we are, just a few years after that, the Jewish state gets recognized by the United Nations, founded. This pasuk over here. Prophecy, therefore, and say to them, thus said Hashem, God, I'm going to open your graves and lift you out of your graves, O my people, and bring you to the land of Israel. And you will know that my people, that I am Hashem, when I have opened your graves and lifted you out of your graves. And there's powerful, powerful imagery that is mentioned by Yechezkel. And Yechezkel is talking about how the people felt like they were dry bones in their own time. but it has tremendous analogy in what happened in the 1940s of the last century. Now, there's another one of the other very important nivuot that really we see fulfilled in this in the foundation of the state is that Yirmiyahu Lamed Aleph. So also Nevuah after Nevuah. I'm not going to go through all of them. It's Yirmiyahu Lamed Aleph. It's Yeshayahu. It's time and time. But the other one that's really the one I do want to focus on is this Nevuah in Zechariah Perek Chet. Now, Zechariah Perek Chet. Do you see it, Bowie? Is it
yeah.
Okay, this is a tremendous chapter, a couple of chapters. I'm sure you're familiar with it. They approach the Navi and they ask him, should we fast on Tisha B'Av again? And he answers what he answers. For another time, we'll talk about it. And in the midst of that, he speaks about what's going to happen. And he says, thus said, Ko amar Adonai shavti el Tzion v'shachanti b'tof Yerushalayim. נקרא ירושלים עיר האמת והר אדוני צבאות הר קודש. כה אמר אדוני צבאות, such says Hashem of hosts, עוד ישו זקנים וזקנות ברחובות ירושלים ואיש כבישתו בידו מרוב ימים. That there'll be old men and women in the squares of Jerusalem, each one with a cane in their hand because of their great age. ורחובות העיר ימלאו ילדים וילדות משחקים ברחובותיה, and the squares of the city shall be crowded with boys and girls playing in the squares. Now, you know where that's engraved, right? You know where that's engraved in the old city? You've seen that?
Is it in the square by the Horvat synagogue?
The square around Batei Machzeh. This is it. So now, why was it such a great, unbelievable prophecy? Because the Zechariah, they just had returned. Now, who returns? There's strong young people, young men and women there's no old people in the new settlement. There's no young children either. It's like more the pioneers that are going to go out. Mm-hmm. And it was such an unbelievable prophecy that the next verse, right? Ko amar Adonai Tzevaot, ki yipaleh be'enei sherit ha'am hazeh b'yamim hahem, gam be'enai yipalelu Adonai Tzevaot. If this is unbelievable to the people who will be living in those times, also it's pretty unbelievable to me, Hashem says. So it's we and not to mention Yirmiyahu, we speaks about Kibbutz Galayot. I believe, and he says that it's going to be greater than Yetziat Mitzrayim. I believe that we are living in the times and more miraculous than Yetziat Mitzrayim, because Yetziat Mitzrayim was from one country. Yetziat Mitzrayim was maximum 430 years, maybe 210 according to Chazal. Yetziat Mitzrayim, we're with thousands of years in Galut, from countries dispersed all over the world, and we live. I think the only difference is we lack a Moshe Rabbeinu to write up the history, to write up the faith history, the history that is going to speak about it in faith terms. Some attempts have been made, by the way. I don't know if you're familiar with Dr. Hagi Ben Arsi.
Yeah, I'm familiar with him.
Did you read any of his? He has a book that we're having him speaking tomorrow night in my synagogue.
Oh, nice.
He wrote this book.
Megillat Shesh Tamim.
Yeah, are you familiar with it?
Maybe. I haven't read it. I know he also has a Megillat Hanukkah.
Yes, I have that as well. This is an attempt to write in the kind of he has it in Hebrew also. I have it somewhere in Hebrew. Yeah. It's in Hebrew where it's he writes it in chapters and psukim, like just like a Perek of Tanakh would be written, like he does with Megillat Chanukah, and it is such an inspiring work because he does speak about the miracles. Tomorrow night he's speaking about Milchemet Gvura v'Nisim and Milchemet Ha'atzmaut, and I invited him because that's exactly the balance that I wanted to bring over to my community. So we're living a Nivuah, we're living the reality of Nivuah come to pass, and it's kind of amazing that there are still people that don't think it's a miracle. If some people say that in the Mizmor Shel Yom HaShabbat, right? When it says, "V'agadlu ma'asecha Adonai v'ma'od yamku machshevotecha, ish ba'al lo yeda u'ksil lo yevin zot," right? So this is an unbelievable thing that God was able to create people so foolish and so ignorant that they could still not believe in Him after seeing all these things. And I think about people who just live in Israel, experience all these tremendous miracles at great cost. I mean, great human cost and tragic cost. But the sum total is an unbelievable miracle. And still say, well, God doesn't exist or whatever. So, do you have, Maury, any children that were born in Israel?
All my 3 kids were born in Israel.
So they speak Hebrew at a level of Sfaten.
Yeah.
Right. So the fact that the Hebrew language became once again a mother tongue, which is time and time again we see things that didn't happen to any other country, any other nation in history, right? Is happened to Am Yisrael, and this is we walk around, you hear these kids speaking, and you say, "Oh, just 100 years ago, this didn't happen." The kids grew up as their first language was Hebrew. It just didn't happen. We know who the first person, right? Itamar ben Avi, ben Eliezer ben Yehuda, is the first one who spoke Hebrew as a mother tongue. It's an unbelievable thing. But thing after thing is just unique to the Jewish people, unique to Am Yisrael, and we get the chance to live in it. Things are far from perfect, but what a tremendous opportunity we have. Going into this Yom Ha'atzmaut, it's mixed with the sorrow of the tremendous cost that had to go through to be here, and that we still have to pay sometimes. But it's mixed also with a tremendous high, and it really encompasses the next couple of days. In my view, the mixed and complex aspect of Jewish history. So I thank God every morning to be born in this period of time, to see what my grandfather, great-grandfather would only dream about. When I used to live in the hills of, on the border of Midbar Yehuda, a place called Pnei Keden. Really, I would walk around, and sometimes I had the feeling that my ancestors were looking through my eyes and looking at the current Jewish nation and telling me, Raphael, go look over there. I want to see what that area is. And they're seeing this through our eyes. And I hope they really are.
I heard you say this before, Rabbi, at a class you gave, I think it was 2 years ago. And when I heard it, I really liked it. So ever since then, I also hear the voices.
Yes. So Chag Sameach, thank you for joining. And I will be giving one more class before Yom Yerushalayim in order to prepare for that. And it will be using a lot of Hagi Ben Altsi's material and about the miracles of the 6-day walk. So you're welcome to join if you'd like. And Laila Tov v'Chag Sameach.